it sounds like such a cliche, but I mean, the more places you go and the more people you meet, you know, those ironclad things that you know about life sometimes are like, they start to smudge a little bit, and it's, you know, I really thought I had a handle on, you know, topic X until I went here and met some of these people, and it's like, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I knew from a distance.
Yeah. I almost always feel like, actually something I've been doing for the past, I don't know, less than a year is just thinking through what would it take for me to be wrong, like on this side of an argument. And once you put yourself in the spot of like, actually, someone else might have a better answer, or their perspective meaningfully changes what it is, and then you back off enough, and then there's actual space to have a conversation, and reasonable people can disagree, and it's still okay. But yeah, plenty of other times I feel like we're just, you know what we know, and that's got to be the right way because it's worked for us, and let's try to make it the right way for everybody else too.
Everyone's trying to, I don't know, figure out the world and try to make sense of the world around them. And so, you know, if the things that you thought you knew, whatever they are, you know, get shattered, it can be kind of hard to admit it, because in a way you're sort of admitting that you don't have as much control as maybe you thought you did. And like, I think a lot of us spend a pretty good amount of our life trying to control things.
And and understandably so. And I would say, you know, the patient population that I work with is comprised largely of people who have realized that is inaccurate. Like, you see how much life can change in a split second or in a small season in life, and everything that you thought you knew and the trajectory of your life or your child's life or, you know, whatever it is, like, oh, it's not going to be that way. It's not necessarily like the end of everything, but it is, it'll make you think.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm sure you guys deal with a fair amount of young kids or, you know, school age, young adults. You know, a lot of kids, the physical activities that they take part in, like you mentioned, you know, your kids aren't big sports kids, but there's a lot of kids that play sports and it's like the core of their identity. Yeah. Right. And if there's an accident or an illness and all of a sudden there's literally a part of you missing now and you can't do that the way that you used to do it, it's like your entire self-identity is like completely shattered. And it's like, you have no choice but to develop resiliency.
Yeah, one of the high school boy that we're working with right now, who is just a year and a week out of, he had a snowmobile accident. He's from the Midwest, and, you know, great high school athlete, 3-sport athlete, and, you know, just trying to figure out, but like you were saying, like, his identity is rooted in being student athlete. And okay, I think maybe I could, you know, play at the next level in one of these sports. Which one, and then which one went the best before he was an amputee compared to what life is like now. And, you know, and even just thinking through some things this morning of, okay, when you are batting and it's, you know, your front leg, exactly how high can you pick that up, and where do you want to step down on it, because you don't have an ankle anymore. So exactly how you are pivoting in that, and you're going to try to, you know, clear your hips through so you can whatever sprint to first base or something like that. And he's like, yeah, you know, because he's a pitcher as well. He said that the things that I struggle with as a batter go away when I'm a pitcher. And, you know, some of that is like, okay, well, do you really lean on your pitching prowess, and that's what you want to work in, or are you trying to be, you know, a 5-tool athlete, and you need to make sure that you're covering all those bases. But it's a, you know, it's a big shock to the system when you think you have everything mapped out, and it's more like, I'm going to be entertaining offers from lots of schools for lots of sports, and then everything's just on pause for a long period of time before you can start to crank all that up again.
Yeah. I mean, I was not an exceptional high school kid, and I'm just trying to put myself in the position of, you know, having a life event like that that changes myself, like, you know, your life so drastically. So back to the start a little bit. This is a nonprofit, and I was doing a little bit of reading on your website, and there was a mention of, I'm paraphrasing, but like where health insurance kind of falls short.
Yeah.
You know, that's got to be part of the origin story, right?
Yeah. So the origin really begins close to 40 years ago. At this point, there was a kid that grew up in the 80s, and as most people in the 80s, he had a big wheel tricycle. I certainly had one of those. It was this great big plastic wheel, and yeah, you feel like you're on a chopper. And and he grew up in northwest Nashville, and was just on his trike when he was 3-4 years old, and a guy in a pickup truck just didn't see him, and hit and dragged him about 70 or so feet, dragged most of his foot off. So he went to Vanderbilt, had his foot removed, and he enjoyed being a kid. As he was getting older, he enjoyed lots of different sports. Football was his favorite sport, and he did very well in that. He kind of split time between Nashville and about an hour outside Nashville, and was the I think MVP for his special teams unit for his high school football team, and he had gone up to the Shriners system in Lexington, Kentucky for his prosthetic care, and they provided him with adequate feet for basic activities, but the prosthetic legs, prosthetic feet that they were giving him just couldn't withstand all of the abuse that he was putting them through by playing sports. So he broke probably dozens of feet as a child. And he has since told me, like, well, I knew when the foot was about to fail, it's because I had fractured enough stuff in there that it started feeling like I had an ankle again. But that's just because I had, not completely broken it. I had just started to break it.
Got it.
And he was a good enough football player that they asked him to play in the Shriners Tennessee East-West Bowl. So he's playing that game, and he was a linebacker, I think, in that game, and broke his foot. That was an ESPN televised game, broke his foot in that game. And he's like, whatever, time 21, broke a foot, no big deal. Go to the sideline, grab a roll of duct taped his foot back together, told the coach to put him back in. And, the coach kind of has the same face that you have, like, well, this is not what I'm used to seeing. The announcers, the fans, people on TV are all like, okay, this is atypical. And a guy watching that on TV said, we need to make something better. This kid is doing everything that he can do. So reached out. I think that was Ryan's senior year, said, my organization, and that was not a nonprofit. It was just, someone in prosthetics who wanted to make a difference, said, we're going to make you a running leg. Ryan used that running leg to run track for Tennessee State. So I believe he was the first amputee to be a D1 track athlete.
Wow.
He then, his coach said, hey, you're really good at this. You may want to give the Paralympics a shot. This was back in 2004. So he ran in the Athens Paralympics, got team and individual medals there, was on the U.S. touring team for a few years after that. And then he went back to school to become a prosthetist. Like, it's great. I have this undergraduate education, but what do I really want to do in my life? I've had world travel experience that's been really helpful and informative in just, expanding what he sees and what opportunities are out there, and what other people have to go through just to be able to walk in the way that he's able to walk.
Yeah.
So after he went to Northwestern for school, came back, and he was doing residency here in Nashville. And his residency director, Aaron, had big heart. He got his start in prosthetics first he was a therapist, and he was in Memphis, so working with St. Jude's. And the prosthetist there said, you really seem to have a knack for this if you thought about this as a career. So he went back to school to become a prosthetist. And then, he's from Middle Tennessee. I think everyone from Middle Tennessee understands why you would want to be in Middle Tennessee, not West Tennessee long term. It's just it's a very different cultural thing. It's like, Nashville is home. So he came back here, but just big motor, really wants to help as many people as quickly as possible. And he was doing, prosthetic mission work overseas and got burned when going to Haiti. They said, we're really happy that you're in Haiti and you want to do prosthetic care for Haitians, but if you want any of your equipment to get off the plane, we need, you to grease the skids.
Yeah.
And then he was just really struggling with, I want to help, I just don't know that participating in bribery kind of fits with what my understanding of help is. So when he's back in the States, he's talking to people at church, family, his resident, and I want to help. I'm just not quite sure how to help. And, Ryan, the resident, says, well, someone gave me a running leg and I can more or less draw a straight line from that to all of these other great experiences in my life. And what if we did that for other people? Especially at the time, insurance typically says it's not medically necessary to do anything other than walk. So if you have insurance, then they'll try to get you, back upright and basic ambulation again. But if you want to be back where you were as an athlete, or, for Ryan, to ever have the chance of becoming an athlete, because it's not like he was, lettering in any sports as a 3-year-old when he lost his foot. He just wanted the opportunity to do normal kid things. So that's really where it came from. It was to prosthetics folks and a guy that does prosthetic fabrication, so actually makes like the carbon fiber sockets, and said, let's, this seems like something worth doing. So that's where we came from. That was probably 2010 when that conversation was happening, and it was late 2011 when we were incorporated as an official 501c3.
Wow. All right. Well, thanks for coming in. Was it now? That was very comprehensive.
I've at least said that story a time or two.
I bet. I'm surprised you don't have a card with it, like written all the cliff notes. I had a feeling that the story was, kind of like that. I feel like this is the kind of thing that is born out of somebody like firsthand experiencing it, in some way, shape, or form. Where do you come in?
So I knew those guys at that time, and for a little bit before that. So I've always done healthcare in Nashville. And
what's that mean? You've done healthcare in Nashville?
So I do not have a license to practice any version of medicine, and I am not going to make your leg, and you would not want me to do that. So it's always been something on the administrative side.
Gotcha.
In healthcare. The first thing that I did in the healthcare space was working as a surgery scheduler. Okay. And I was 20, 21 at the time, probably not emotionally, I don't know, capable enough to have some of these conversations. But the reason that 8 out of 10 people lose their leg in the U.S. is for diabetes or dysphastular reasons. It's just, interruption of blood flow over a long period of time. And usually it would be, older white male and right foot would be the first thing that would go, and the right side because your heart's on the left side. So it just takes a little bit more for the blood to get over there. So I have very clear memory of the first amputation that I ever scheduled. And it's it'll wake you up when you are the very first person to talk to a patient and their family after the doctor says, I'm going to have to cut your leg off. And then they say, and this guy right here, he's going to find the time to sync up the schedules for when I'm going to lop this thing off. Right. And then how do you say, hello, how are you? How's it going?
Yeah, not a doctor, no bedside, you got to learn all of that in real time, just through repetition practically.
Yeah. So and that guy, he was a very white man with a very black foot. His foot had died probably, a month or more before that. And I got home that night and I told my wife, like, I didn't know to be grateful that blood didn't go all the way to my feet, or like at some point that stops for some people. You know, you're young, healthy, and you just kind of figure like this is how it works for everyone, or this is at least how it is for me. So to be confronted with mortality, I guess, in that way was definitely a little bit of a shock to my system. And then wasn't that guy, but it was a different person. Few months later, you know, went through a similar thing, and then he came back in the office and he was wearing a prosthetic leg. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And I asked the doctor, like, hey, how did he get this prosthetic leg? And he's like, I don't know. I assume you scheduled something. Like, nope, I scheduled for you to take his foot off, and that's really kind of the last thing I did with this guy. So I was very interested in prosthetics as a result, because I saw the first part, so it made sense to see like, well, what's the bookend to this story? So was very interested when Aaron and Ryan, because they wound up working inside the same place where I was, which is a great thing for patient care when the prosthetist and the surgeons are both clearly on the same team, working from the same chart, you know, in the same office, all that kind of thing. It's just easier to put the patient in the middle of care in that way. But I wound up leaving that private practice and going into the nonprofit side of healthcare. And I was running a primary care office for people that have jobs and didn't have insurance, because I liked the idea of, all right, these are people who are, they have some obstacle, a health thing or whatever, and they were doing everything in their power to make it right. And, you know, it's not like I was an Olympic runner or anything like that, like Ryan was a Paralympic runner, but I enjoy running. It's one of those things where, you know, all you need is a pair of shoes and the determination to walk out the front door and put one foot in front of the other and just, you know, keep doing that for as long as you want to do. So I like the accessibility of that. And it was about this time, 2017, when there was going to be a Ragnar relay in Tennessee, which they don't have them in Tennessee anymore, but they have them all over the U.S. And really, it's a point A to point B 200-mile relay race that you do with you and, you know, 5 to 11 of your friends. So you're running, each runner runs 3 legs, and you know, you're just kind of leapfrogging 2 different bands. So we were running from downtown Chattanooga to downtown Nashville. Wow. That was what the course was. I had always thought like, yeah, this would be a great experience. So my wife and I had a bunch of friends from church. We say, we're going to do this Ragnar relay. So, you know, we go there. I already knew some of the Amputee Blade Runners people. So we wind up in Jasper, Tennessee. So just on the other side of Lookout Mountain, on the Chattanooga side. And all the vans were there together. It was the first major exchange. I see the ABR people like, oh, you know, I know a couple of the folks. I'll go say hi, you know, runner to runner. And, you know, again, early March was when the run was, which for me meant if I'm going to be in like good mid-season running condition, that means I need to train a lot in the winter, which means running on a treadmill, which I don't know if you know this, but treadmills were originally created as a torture device. The idea of moving a lot and not going anywhere was supposed to be like a psychological...
I believe they might still be that.
Right. I mean, I don't know anyone who says, you know what I really love is hopping on that treadmill. And running at night, which is, you know, it's better than running on a treadmill, but there are some safety elements that go along with all of that. So for me to be in really good running shape early in the season, you know, I'm giving myself such a pat on the back, like I'm really doing this. And, you know, then I meet everyone on the ABR team, which that year, so they had 12 runners, we had 12 runners, but they only had 9 human feet between their 12 runners, because they had 3 double amputees, 9 single amputees. And that's when I started thinking like, all right, I've been congratulating myself a lot on how hard I have worked to be here right now, but I feel like I'm looking at 12 people who have all worked quantitatively and qualitatively differently to be ready for this same event. And now we're all here. We are participating, you know, at more or less the same rate. Some of their runners were faster than I am. Some were my pace. Some were slower, which pretty much looked like what my band was. Yeah. So that just gave me a different sense of what the organization was and who it impacted. You know, I had known who they were, but more as a small-time supporter, you know, at arm's length. So that's what kind of brought me in closer. And they had been primarily volunteer-driven. And it was later that year they said, you know, if we're really going to have some growth, we probably need to have someone who is going to wake up and think about ABR first and foremost and do that, you know, all day, every day. And that wound up, you know, I always hate to say like, oh yeah, I'm the answer to a problem, but I knew something about amputation. I knew something about those individuals who had started the organization. I like running, and at the time that I wasn't involved in that aspect of things, I was running a different healthcare organization for, you know, for needs for people where insurance was not part of the equation. So it just distilled down to, I have a lot of experiences that could help this organization. And why do I have these experiences and backgrounds if I'm not supposed to use them in this way? So it was, you know, I don't wear a leg. No one in my family wears a leg. That definitely, it's a question that I get from a lot of people. Okay, why do you care about this? You didn't go to school for it, and, you know, this wasn't thrust upon you. But again, I really like working with resilient people, for people who have been through a lot of really difficult things, and you see the hope that they have, the opportunity they have, and how, you know, not Pollyanna, but just how real they are in the face of adversity. And I really enjoy working with, you know, people that show up every day and they are willing to put the work in to make things better for them, and their desire to pay it forward and help other people in the way that they have been helped is really refreshing as well.
Yeah, the community element of it, I bet, is really fulfilling. So was it like did you sort of reach out to them, you know, after this race and, you know, the time after, were you like, hey, maybe I can help? Or were they like,
you know,
we need this guy?
I'd had a little bit of, you know, communication, and it was probably about 6 months after, well, 4 months after that race, where they had said, okay, we really are looking for a full-time person. And I was one of the people that they had reached out to. And actually, you know, my wife said like, well, okay, are you going to talk to them about the job? And I said, no, I'm very happy with the work that I'm doing. And, you know, I do a good job for a patient population that I enjoy working for and working with. And she's like, I think you should just talk to them. Just have a conversation. And I'm like, okay, sure, you know, they're friends. It wouldn't be a bad thing to, you know, catch up and talk specifics, but, you know, and maybe I can help point them in the right way. So I don't know, I might have been surprised as anyone when I walked away from, you know, that quote unquote interview with a friend, like, actually, I think I want this job.
Yeah, always listen to the wife.
Yeah, that can be the tagline of the whole thing.
You know, you mentioned, you know, that occasionally you get comments or questions, you know, like, why do you care? I mean, it doesn't you don't have to wear a prosthetic I mean, you worked in the space, you worked with the people firsthand. I mean, you went on this running, like, relay race with these folks, and then they reached out to you. I mean, it feels like it's kind of meant to be, like, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you not, like, see the way things align and go, I should probably be doing this.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
And you were like, I have a good job, and your wife was like, no, idiot.
Yeah, like, but this one, and, you know, and it's not like it's all sunshine and roses, but it definitely, especially as someone who works in healthcare but is not an actual healthcare provider,
right?
To have the opportunity of getting out of bed every day and not just working on it's a problem. So, you know, the biggest drivers for me is I like problem solving and I like helping people. Those are like the core, like, if I'm doing those things, I will probably have some level of job satisfaction, whether that's a paying thing or, you know, I'm just doing weekend projects at home. That translates to, you know, this type of work and maybe it's just because I'm dumb, But the people who can work to improve a system and not know personally like the end user of that, it just boggles my mind. Like, I don't know how you can just try to make a system better and not know the people that integrate or benefit from that system. So for me, it's great to, for instance, this past week, we were working with a 10-year-old boy who, outgrew the leg that we made him when he was 8 years old. He didn't do anything wrong. He just ate, drank, slept, and, did normal life. Like, as it turns out, you're 30 pounds heavier and 3 inches taller, and, that leg, it doesn't work anymore. And, it takes a lot to get through, especially at younger ages, just, hey, there's going to be a lot of change, and even remembering everything that we did from a year and a half ago, that's an eternity for a 10-year-old boy. So, going through those things with his younger brother, with his mom, with his grandmother, and trying to lead them all together because they are his daily support system. So they need to know as much as he needs to know at this point. And then, it's pretty great getting those text messages over the weekend from mom while he's at his basketball game and he's running up and down the court much more comfortably than he was. She can see the spring in his step. And you can see, like, okay, that was kind of a lot that we put into this past week, but we're immediately seeing the rewards from that. And, to actually see a smile on the kid's face and know the human behind that smile, and it's not just a postcard type of thing. That's very motivating for me.
So how does it, quote unquote, work now? So do people reach out to you and say, like, I have a need, I'm having difficulty with insurance, or I have a child who's in need? Is there like outreach that y'all do to, like, bring people into the fold? It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's so there is an application process. It's a slightly different pathway for children and adults. Children, we more or less default to, if they have the equipment, they'll use the equipment. Most kids want to be active, and if you give them the ability to be more active, maybe they will be an incredible athlete, or maybe they'll just be more able to participate in normal kid things. The very first conversation I had along those lines, before I even started with ABR, and I had just said, yes, I will, but I was not an employee yet. She was probably 8 years old at the time, and she had a congenital limb difference. So she never remembered life without wearing a prosthesis. She was only a few months old when they did amputation, and she needs to wear a knee and a foot. And they had traveled down from Chicagoland to get a new leg. And, I'm asking this, elementary school age girl, like, okay, well, why do you want a running leg? And her answer was very basic. And she said, I want to play tag with my friends. And, and her dad's sitting right there. He's like, well, I mean, like, you can play tag with your friends now. And she said, sure, Dad, as long as they all agree to walk. Yeah, and you
I'm always it, though.
Yeah, you spin that out like, okay, so at some point, those friends probably won't ask you to play tag because they'll know, like, well, that means, like, everyone has to walk. And, and we're 8, and we don't just want to play walk tag. Yeah. And then, they're not going to ask her to play tag, and maybe they're not going to ask her for the sleepover, and then she's not going to get a great grade, and she's going to think, like, well, I'm no good at running, and I'm no good at keeping friends, so it makes sense that I'm no good at, academics. And then you wind up as a probably frustrated, depressed, sedentary adult where, you could just try to interrupt that and say, like, okay, what can you do where you feel like you can participate? You don't have to be on the sidelines. She's a senior in high school now, and she's actually doing an internship with us currently. Oh, cool. So I've had the opportunity to have that same conversation with her. Like, do you remember all of this stuff? And, and what do you think differently about life now? And just, seeing that she did have the opportunity to try a lot of different sports. She also said that, she picked tennis because the uniforms are the best. But, just things like, yeah, sure, like, you can pick what you do based on reasons that any other high school girl would pick what they want to do. And that's lots of different factors and what are my friends doing and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and not a, well, I don't get to pick anything at all, or if I do, then I'm the charity case. You know, someone's letting me be on the team because they feel bad for me, not because I earned what this is.
And I think that process is, I mean, it's like a triple win, because not only do these kids have a huge, they have to overcome like these hugely disruptive obstacles in their lives, which builds its own kind of resiliency, but then also it can help a young kid learn that not to internalize all of their struggles. Like you said, if you can disrupt that sort of that victimization, like downhill spiral that, like you said, could very easily lead to, you know, a sedentary adulthood. You almost present problems to these kids in ways that's like, well, yeah, you know, I have the foot now and I can play tag, but it's only walk tag. Whereas if I get the right tool, if I change, you know, then it becomes less about like their intrinsic value as a person, and kind of enables that problem-solving mode that's only going to help them like as adults, rather than to be like emotionally crushed by a problem. They'll be much more equipped to deal with whatever else comes their way.
Yeah, yeah, and so often, you know, you talk to a child like that, and you know, she told me last week, she's like, you know, people will say, so she's working as a waitress, you know, as a server, and you know, so she's interacting with strangers and the public on a very regular basis, and you know, they can see that she is wearing a fake leg, and they'll want to engage. You know, it's Nashville, so I'm sure a lot of them are tourists, and you know, just asking more detailed questions, and really they want to hear like, what's your country music song, like what's the sob story, and she will say like, it's, you know, this isn't a sad story, like this is part of who I am, but you know, I don't have a sob story to spin. This is just my life, and you know, and I'm pretty successful at my life, and you know, did you want an appetizer or not?
Yeah. Like, would you like more iced tea? I'm not actually feeling sad about myself right now.
Yeah. Yeah. The
But
other
thank you
thing
for assuming that I am.
that
I bet that gets you know, I bet
yeah,
that they deal with that a lot out in public.
yeah. There's a big, because a lot of people will find it inspiring. You know, you're at a race, you're at a, you know, any type of sporting event, and you see someone who has something very visually arresting. You know, they're wearing carbon fiber on them, and they're using that to do whatever the thing is, and they'll, you know, be a lot of, wow, you know, you're such an inspiration. And sometimes that's, you know, they'll get that when they're walking around the grocery store.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, that is okay, you know, I'm participating in some type of sports event. And it's on one hand, sure, I'm out here, I'm in the public eye, and I am not ashamed to show that I am different and yet I still belong. And that's great. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have and you're just such an inspiration. And the thought of, yeah, but I'm not living my life for you to be inspired. I'm living my life to be the best version of me that I can be. And, you know, just to say like it's such an inspiration, sometimes that will mess with people because like,
I'll bet that gets frustrating. Like you mentioned, you know, the grocery store, just regular stuff that everyone has to get done is like, you're such an inspiration. It's like, I actually have no food in my house and I'm starving and I really suck at cooking and like all like.
Yeah. Yes, it turns out like I just need to get lettuce or I need to get half a pound of chicken or, you know, whatever the thing is.
I actually am just struggling to feed myself because of nothing to do with, you know, my prosthetic.
Yeah, because I'm human. And as it turns out, all creatures have to have calories.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah. I bet that gets frustrating. Not to equate my plight with those of, you know, some of the folks you deal with, but I have 2 Achilles repairs, and the second one was 2 years ago, two Mays ago, and I had the iWalk crutch.
Yeah,
you know, because I'm at the time I was a single dog dad living alone, and I was like, I can't not have my hands,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I mean, it was interesting, you know, because I feel like a lot of people have, you know, had an injury here or there. They were on crutches. That's like a fairly common experience. But using the eye walker, you know, was definitely that there were times I didn't go out a ton in it, but there were times where I went out and I was like, I can probably go to the grocery store. And it was like after 10 minutes, I was like, I'm exhausted and like I need a nap. And like so, you know, not to be one of those people that's like, oh, you're so inspiring for existing. Like, but it did kind of open my eyes. I was like, God, this is hard.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
hard as hell.
I had
Like, I'm
very
exhausted.
similar with the ice storm a few weeks ago. Just like okay, now if I'm going to do really any walking outside my home, I'm going to be very careful. And I'm going to think like, you know, a slip and a fall is, that could be pretty bad. And it's much more likely to occur because I just don't have the same biomechanical control of
Right.
my body and what my body is interfacing with. And, you know, can I get by? Sure. Can I survive? Yeah. But you think about it and it takes more out of you to walk 1,000 feet, 10,000 steps, you know, whatever the thing is, when you have reduced mobility for whatever reason. You had an Achilles rupture, you had, you know, ice on the ground, you lost a leg, you know, all of those things sure have differences, but I think it is a lens to see how everyone is. And, you know, like we were saying earlier, I don't wear a leg, but that doesn't mean that I can't understand in a way what someone is up against. It's not going to be the exact same as if I also wore a leg, and I totally get that. But I think it's important for humanity to be able to say, I can see where you are coming from, even if we are not the exact same in all ways.
Yeah, empathy, you know, experiencing people that experience the world differently than you do, you know, and having empathy for, you know, somebody who's going through something differently or separate than you.
Yeah.
I think it, you know, the more of that you can do, you know, as people navigate life, I think the better off it is, you know, community wise, you know. And no matter how big a lens you put on the word community, whether it's just, you know, your neighborhood or your town or your church or, you know, the state, or whether you view the entire country as a community, it's just, you know, I think all the time about how big this country is, just like it's just so huge,
Yeah.
right? It's almost crazy that it's one country, you know, and there's just so many folks living such different styles. I don't know if style is the right word because not everyone chooses their lifestyle, but yeah, I mean, I think it's the kind of thing where the more exposure you can get, you know, to the more kinds of people, it's like it's just it averages just your empathy and your compassion for other people up, like on an upward trend as you age.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, definitely in the work that we do, we have an athlete in almost every state in the country. So sometimes I feel like I have the opportunity to vicariously live through someone else's life, where, you know, what their day-to-day is very different based on what region they are. And I think everyone would say, okay, I went through this and it's, you know, it's not necessarily something that I love having limb loss or the reason that led to limb loss, but the opportunities that have come to meet people in a much broader background, because it really doesn't matter how old you are when you lost your leg, why you lost your leg, at what level the amputation was done, how many amputations were done. Once you were at that stage of wearing a prosthetic device or approaching being ready to wear one, the comfort and commonality that you have with other people who have been through similar things, the closest approximation would be for veterans, where it doesn't really matter what branch of the military you were in, you know, what theater you were in, you know, a World War II vet and a Vietnam vet and, you know, a Desert Storm vet would probably all say, like, we know something about each other that maybe other people in our lives don't. And even though they were so different in so many ways, they still have a special and important bond.
Yeah.
And same thing for amputees.
Yeah, for sure. So have you mentioned like veterans, right? How much of what you guys do is working with veterans?
It's honestly, it's a pretty small percentage of the overall population. Usually that turns on, was this a directly service-related injury? And if it was, then the military and the VA system is standing behind. And they are much more likely historically to try to make sure that the person has all the prosthetic care and equipment they need in order to get back to that level of function. This is kind of a unique thing. So if you wear a prosthetic leg and you want to go into the military, you will, at least historically, you would be excluded. You would say, nope, this person is not and can never be fit for duty. So Ryan, you know, who we were talking about at the top, you know, was interested, like, okay, could this be a career path for me? And nope, sorry, you wear a leg.
Yeah.
If you lost your leg as a member of the armed services, then sometimes there can be a pathway where you can stay,
Right.
you know, same rank, you know, all of those kinds of
in
things.
a different role, probably.
Yeah, and you know, there are still some people who, you know, they can do everything that they did before. It looks different now. So that it's not the primary service population for us.
Gotcha.
We see a lot of people, trauma, that's probably still, you know, a leading reason that we would see people. But really the four primary reasons that we interface with people, again, diabetes, dysvascular disease, 8 out of 10. That is the leading reason in the U.S., but that is not the leading reason for the high activity individual. For those, it's trauma, so snowmobile accidents, car accidents, you know, things like that. Cancer, usually that's some type of bone cancer or, you know, something related to that. Infections and congenital conditions. Overall, the congenitally limb different person, that's about 0.8% of all amputations done on an annual basis. So it's you know, when you don't quite make up 1% of an already small thing, they are a minority group within a minority group within a minority group. And it's really hard for someone that is in that small of a bubble to really have anyone on the outside who is thinking of them, trying to design things that would optimize what life is like for them. So we see a decent number of that, but also, you know, if you have a congenital limb difference, you're also going to be a prosthetic user for many more years than really almost anyone else, because you have no memory in most cases of taking a step without aid of a prosthesis.
Gotcha.
So, you know, they're probably, for the most part, otherwise healthy, so they'll live, you know, the normal 70 plus years that most Americans would live. They would just maybe need a prosthetic device for 70 of those years.
So when folks come through your doors and you know, there's an application process, and I'm assuming some consultation sort of procedures, how do y'all decide or choose or fit folks with prosthetics? I mean, this is not something that I know anything about this world, about how it works. So maybe some of your audience members might, but so are there donations of prosthetics, or are you ordering them? Like, you know what I mean? How does one get, like, wind up with the prosthetic with the consultation process through you guys?
Yeah. So it's some of both. So there are some things that we are buying and some things that we are making. So the things that you can buy would be, you know, a sports foot. I mean, any kind of foot, you know, it's sports feet. For me, things that you might still need to wear a cleat in,
Okay.
or your basketball sneaker or something like that. A running blade is great for the things that it is designed for, but really that's straight line running because it only has a toe. There's no heel. So if you're doing lots of pivoting because you're a pitcher or you're batting or things like that, you may need a different type of thing. So all of those you would buy. If the person needs a knee, you would buy. And other connecting components and things
Gotcha.
like that. The thing that we make is the part that actually fits on the human. So for anyone who's ever broken a bone and been in a hard cast, you would probably be familiar with this aspect of what patient care looks like. You're trying to capture their anatomy, their exact shape at that moment in time, and you're doing that by taking plaster and you're wrapping it around the residual limb. And then once that's done, it's not like all right, now it needs to be on for, a few weeks until your bone heals. We just needed to capture that. So 15 minutes on, and now we're going to cut it off, take that off, and now we're going to fill that up with plaster. So we're back to okay, this is what your leg looks like. And now we can do modifications because maybe they have bone spurs in one area, or they have, they can bear weight more comfortably in one spot. And that all depends on the reason that they lost their leg, how the surgery was done, are they still growing, lots of variables like that. And then you go through a successive, you want to make what's called a test socket. So you would heat plastic up and pull that over the mold. So then you would have kind of an opaque socket that they could still put on, but you can see through that and you can see how their leg looks inside that.
Gotcha.
Because once you go into a final version, then you are entirely waiting on the person's feedback for what they're feeling, but you don't really have a visual to compare to.
Yeah.
And I would say and that's especially hard when it's a little kid, but honestly, it's just especially hard because people can translate lots of different sensations into I really think it's this, and maybe it has nothing to do with that thing. It's just a referred thought, or they had a problem with that 3 years ago and now they're remembering it. Yeah. It can be lots of different things. So after you have the test socket on someone, you could put a foot, a knee, both of those things, whatever, on them. It's not going to last for a super long time, but you want to make sure okay, do we have the plan right? Gotcha. This is, the control S thing in a very analog concept. Sometimes you need to keep doing that a few times. Okay, we're 90% there, but we're trying to get from, maybe a high B to an A or an A plus, and that just takes more work to get all of those things done. With that 10-year-old boy from Michigan we were talking about, it took 3 different tries over the course of one day. We're almost there. Would this be a little bit better? Would this be a little bit better? Then when you were making the laminated version, so that's carbon fiber, and that can last for a very long time, but it only lasts for as long as that person stays that shape or size. Yeah. So, for kids, somewhere in the 6 to 18 month thing, you can make them the leg that they love more than any other leg that they've had. And at some point this will just turn into trash because it won't fit you and it will have never fit anyone else ever. This was made just for you. Right. So it's the matching up of what's kind of commercially available, as from a prosthetic manufacturer versus what needs to be made specifically for that person in front of you.
What kind of, if any, sort of used market is there, or is that not really, because there's the part that's fitting to you, like you mentioned, which obviously you can't just put that on another person, but are there any other components of the prosthetic world that, I don't know if recycled is the right word, but is there a used component to this?
To a degree. You can, probably everything in the world's available on eBay if you want to find it. By and large, it winds up being so specific for what was that person's weight, what was their activity, how big is their foot on the other side, how long is it, where is it attached, that it winds up not really having lots of utility. Sometimes, if it is you're catching someone, early in in their growth spurt, and it's you've only had this for 2 months, but now you're 15 pounds heavier and 3 inches taller, and we're remaking everything. Maybe there is still life left in one of those things that no longer makes sense for you, and that could be for someone else. But honestly, those are not. That's not your go-to.
So even the components that are not molded or formed, even those components are so specifically tailored to every person that it's not a pair of crutches,
right?
Where you just go snap up, snap down. Oh, now it's the right size. So
yeah,
I'm not sure if that's common knowledge to folks that don't have exposure to this world. That it's just like, like baby clothes,
right?
Like a baby's a baby.
Yep.
Everyone winds up with an excess of clothing that in 5 seconds is not going to fit your child.
Yeah.
You want to give it to someone that's going to get some use out of it. But these are so specifically made and tailored and sized that, it's just kind of like a foot would be.
Yeah.
You can't just give your foot to somebody else and just screw that thing on there. It'll work.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's a foot.
Yeah.
It's got to be your foot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want it to be, a fake leg is not like, the leg that it is replacing, but you want it to be as close to, how a person would see themselves as I am complete, with this, because it enables me to do the things that make me feel complete.
Not in the same way that it's replacing, the biological leg, but it does need to be your leg.
Yeah.
Like it's a different leg, but it still needs to be your leg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. What other kinds of, services or procedures or, or things that you guys offer beyond the sort of, application, fitting, getting people, with the right prosthetics? Like, what are some other things people might not think that you guys do?
So, we definitely do a lot of community building and connecting because maybe, I know someone very much like you and you live in Iowa, and someone who has been through a similar thing for similar reason and enjoys the same sports lives in Dallas. Well, you're probably not going to run into each other, but for you both come to the same place. So sometimes it's we're trying to bring the people to come in for services at the same time so they can overlap and they can meet there. It really doesn't matter the age by and large. Sometimes it can be really helpful if you can match up, your middle school kid with someone who's 16, 17, 18, and they can talk through, those life changes that everyone has to go through, but it's a little bit different. Like, okay, well, what does getting a learner's permit look like when, is it your right leg or your left leg that you're missing? And, are you going to do a pedal swap or, what does that look like? And does the, driver instructor look at you funny? And, what does it look like to ask someone on a date? Or, all of those kind of rite of passage things that, I could talk to someone about that, but it won't mean nearly as much when, old guy says, here's what I think, versus like, oh, that's a version of me just 5 years ahead of me. And sometimes that can be really helpful for parents to talk with other parents. Like, okay, this is what it does look like. And I need to see that there are some successful adults who have been wearing a leg since they were a kid, and it's not the end of world. And they have a job and they have whatever, a car, an apartment, a house, a spouse, any of those kinds of things where they see not just I hope this will work out for me or my child, but I see evidence that this has worked out for other people.
Yeah.
And, then there are events, like that Ragnar relay, where we would say like, hey, yeah, let's bring in people together who all have similar interest at a similar type of thing, and we will go do that thing together. So that could be running a relay race, that could be hiking a mountain, that could be, kayaking a river, that could be a picnic, it could be going to the zoo, lots of things like that where you just want to give people the opportunity to connect, and what drew everyone together. But really, it's just letting people interact with people, because that's, all of what we are doing is trying to give people the opportunity to be members of society, of community, to look in the mirror and feel like, yep, this is the direction that I want to go, and I have the support I need to go in this direction, and maybe to get advice or give advice to other people in similar situations. But it's not the prosthetic thing that I find most motivating, as cool as I think prosthetics are. It's really the opportunity to engage with humanity and to be very real and very present. For limb loss is just barely behind death of a spouse in terms of grief prediction. It is, for most people, I just have to think like the reason that most people walk through the door or call me or email me is directly connected to perhaps the worst thing that happened in their life. And it's going to be a really hard thing in some instances.
Right.
So, I think it's time well spent to see those people, to give them time, and to connect them with other people, because sometimes you can lead in ways that you don't even know that you're capable of, until you're presented with the, hey, would you mind if you as a 45-year-old, can I introduce you to an 8-year-old? And just, talk to, and sometimes it's the 8-year-old that's given the 45-year-old that lesson that he or she really needed to learn. So I've definitely given up on I know how this conversation will go. It's I know something good will come of this, so I'm just going to try to put this thing together and then trust that whatever's going to happen next was the right thing for those parties involved.
I would bet that there's probably some, when you have younger kids, like an 8-year-old kid, I would bet that there's some of that just natural child, nothing sticks to me rubberness that I would bet an adult would find, because us adults, we're all in our own heads about everything all the time. And something like this happens, and then, you see this like little 12-year-old kid who's just like, oh yeah, I got a new leg, the other one doesn't fit, and it's just like, damn, this kid's not nothing stick to him. Yeah,
the resiliency, and some of it is they, we like to say kids are plastic. Like their brains are, still developing, and they can rewire way faster than adults can. And you can have all right, this is what it's like tonight. And this is, you're struggling with figuring out how this thing works. And sure, we could do lots of coaching, and we could talk about, therapy for it. Or we could just say, like, how about we see you first thing tomorrow morning? And you'd be amazed at the number of times they walk in the next morning and something happened while they slept, and they just like, oh, so I'm supposed to do it this way now. Like, yeah, that's it. You got it. I don't really need to do anything else first, which is part of what I was saying. Like, if you give kids the right equipment, they will probably figure out how to make those things work. You give it for an adult, and and they are thinking of the worst thing that ever happened to them, or what's the worst thing that could happen in this instance? Like, well, what if I fall in this first time that I'm trying to run in a running blade? Or I think you and I have both been at the spot where, like, oh, you just don't recover nearly as fast as you used to. Like a little nick and a ding when you're 12 years old, it's gone 36 hours later. And, now it's still like, man, I'm still feeling that, whatever it is, that muscle pull, that contusion, things like that. So kids can respond and adapt. And that's a lot of fun to work with, but it's also really fun when adults have that, I really didn't think I could do this. Like, I thought that part of my life was over, or I would never get to experience that part of my life. One of my favorite stories is a guy from Wisconsin, grew up on a hay farm, and lost his leg in some baling equipment. when he was 10 years old.
Yikes.
And his dad was right there, saw it, probably was the one, that pulled him out from it, probably had some sense of, this was my responsibility. Accidents can happen to anyone at any time. And he had, by lots of measures, he had good life. He went to college. He was a school teacher. He got married. He had kids. He definitely, it wasn't like he was just sitting on the sidelines and not getting to do everything. But at some point, he's in his 50s and his daughters were running. And it's like, I'm kind of interested in like what running would look like. I never really got to experience running. I lost my leg at such an early stage in my life that was just kind of, a thing that passed me by. So wound up applying to us. Like I said, we do have a little bit more expectation for adults. They have to prove it a little bit more because we're trying to show like it's not this shiny new device that's a silver bullet. Your life doesn't immediately get better because of a thing.
It's also not a toy. Like, you know what I mean? It's, you know, if this isn't like because you're bored.
Right.
Right.
And in some ways, I have two teens. One just got a learner's permit. I would not give the inexperienced person, I wouldn't say like, all right, now let's go hop in the Corvette and let's see how it goes. Like if you give too much power to someone when they don't know how to control it, in both instances, a running blade or a sports car, the user's probably going to wind up hurt and in a ditch and maybe having hurt someone else along the way. So you want to make sure that they are ready for the changes that are coming, that they're preparing for that. But back to this now 50-something who wanted to be able to run. He applied and we said yes. We would try to make you a running leg. Came down and he starts running. I believe in Centennial Park. First run that he had in half a lifetime. And he calls his dad and he said, hey, guess what I'm doing? And, his dad's still, 600, 700 miles away. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm in Nashville. What are you doing in Nashville?
Running.
I'm running. He's like, what? Because, he didn't want to get his dad's hopes up, anything like that. He had done that. His wife, his children knew, but no one else in the family knew that he was coming here for it. And his dad said, all right, you stay right there. And his dad got in the car and I think drove through the night because he wanted to see his son that he thought, I made it to where he will never get to experience this very basic human joy of just being able to move at the pace that you want in the way that you want. And he thought that because of him, his son would never have that. So for him to see like, okay, this is a completion of a very hard chapter in his life and his son's life. Was he the best runner ever? No. Do I care about that at all? No. He had the opportunity to do something that was very important to him, and the repair that went on between father and son from going through that in a 40-year interval. I think his dad passed away maybe a year or two after that. So it was like if it's not going to happen then, it would never happen. And I am grateful that we got to be part of the joy that family can collectively experience of knowing that, Dad didn't die always thinking like that he let his son down. So that's, it's small windows like that into humanity.
You got to get that guy on video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get that guy to tell his story. That's a good one.
You were asking earlier, how do we connect with people? So yes, application process. A lot of it is word of mouth where, we're taking care of someone because someone else that they know, we also take care of them. And it's with any business that referral that comes from someone who has actually benefited from whatever it is that your organization does, that is probably going to be one of your warmer leads, someone that you will have a better interaction with. It will be deeper, longer, stronger, all of those kinds of things. I'm very careful of not trying to force it too much. I don't want people who maybe have been sold to a lot to see me in the same light of, all right, you're just, what's in it for me or my organization if we're doing things like that. We do not charge for our services. We're still primarily volunteer driven, and we really try to make the fundraising dollars that we receive go directly to the people that we are trying to serve. And probably the marketing events that I would more frequently do is go to an adaptive event, see where someone wearing a leg is competing against someone else wearing a leg. And I don't have a booth, and I don't buy ad space on whatever the thing is, or local media or anything like that. I just try to be out there in the stands. I try to let the athletes talk to the athletes. If they're kids, give parents an opportunity to talk to parents. And and I'm just there. And if they want to say like, hey, I'm interested in what you guys do and why, and could this benefit me or my child or things like that. I want to have that, but I don't want to force anyone into having that conversation or think that, there's going to be some kind of quid pro quo. One of the great things I think about not charging for the services that we provide is it's just so much easier to be honest about, okay, this is really what we think is going to be the right thing, and here's why we think it's the right thing. And they don't have to be in the background thinking like, okay, are they saying that because, they can charge more for that, or the commission's higher for that, or any of those other things. And not that that's necessarily wrong, but when you are working with a population who maybe they've been burned by things like that, or they just they don't want to be pimped out by someone else. They just they want to be them, and they are looking for help in being them. We try to we just try to live that crazy idea of what would happen if you did the right thing for the right reason.
Yeah. Kind of like your first role in the surgery center, which was like, you're not the surgeon.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the surgeon and then you need my help after that, right here.
Yeah. It's a strange place to be, where that so much about someone else. Even like when I receive an application, I know so much about someone, and maybe I've never heard of them before they clicked send on that. And then you feel like, okay, we very quickly need to make sure that the parent, the individual who sent all of that in, immediately has human connection. And it's not just I sent this, it's out in the ether somewhere. I don't know who's going to be looking at it. I don't know what that person looks like, sounds like, anything like that. And I really bared my soul, and I said, this is what is hard about my life, and this is why it's hard, and this is what I think I need help with, and this is how I could be a more complete version of myself. And you want to immediately understand and recognize that, and you have to be human back to those people, and you have to show like, I've got things going for me and things going against me as well, and it can't just be like, we're up here and you're down there. Like it doesn't work that way. You have to be on the same plane.
Nobody wants to spill their guts and then get an automated, like robo response.
Yeah.
It's smart. Again, rooted in empathy, rather than profit.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing just because it's the right thing.
Yeah.
How can folks, if they hear about this and feel inspired, how can folks find you guys and get in touch and help out?
Yeah. The easiest way to find us is anything Amputee Blade Runners. So our website, amputeebladerunners.com. Social media at Amputee Blade Runners for all the primary social media things out there. Again, we are based here in Music City. We have another location in Savannah, Georgia, and we have athletes in virtually every state in the country. So there are lots of different ways to engage, participate. A lot of the events or community things are happening here because this is where base is for us. We will be doing a lot of storytelling and probably some events during April as Limb Loss Awareness Month, and just trying to make sure that the broader community of the United States doesn't forget that this is it's a small percentage of the population. There's, depending on the stats, between 2 and 5 million people with limb loss, limb difference in the U.S. And out of 350 million, that's kind of small. But it's also like kind of the population of Kentucky. And we'd all probably notice if Kentucky wasn't around anymore.
Right.
So, we do want to make sure that that people see, and they don't have to completely understand, but at least recognize like, oh yeah, these people are here. It definitely, we finished the Olympics last week. We'll have the Paralympics starting next week, and that will be probably good overall awareness for everyone in the adaptive community and people connected to that.
Yeah, and I think for like you said, it's a relatively small population, but accidents happen, at any given day, for any given reason, God forbid.
Yeah.
Any one of us could find ourselves, in a position.
Yeah, and specifically spring, we work with a lot of, they were kids, maybe still are kids, or they were at the time, a lot of lawnmower accidents. A lot of, just neighbor didn't see and was on a riding lawnmower, and there was a little 3-year-old or, whatever it was, just wrong place, wrong time. But I think the stats are there's about 1 foot lost every day from a lawnmower accident in the U.S. Now, that's a small percentage, but if that is your child, if that is you, you don't really care, whether you're one of 1,000 or 10 million. That's a lot to go through.
If it becomes you or it becomes your child, and then someone hits you with it's really not that many people. It's like,
yeah. In some ways, that's even harder when it's like, I know, but
I can imagine.
It hurts
I can
that
imagine
much
a
more.
parent losing their mind when someone's like, well, it's really not that many people. It's like, until it's you.
Right.
Kind of thing. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. This is super interesting. And again, I think this is something that not a lot of folks ever experience firsthand, and like you said, for a lot of people, this all revolves around like the worst thing that's ever happened to them. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you. Be mindful of your time. Let's
Yeah,
get out of
enjoyed
here.
it.
We've been going for over an hour.
Man,
which
time flies.
Yeah, that seemed like it was quick. I was like, are we at an hour yet? We are over an hour.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for watching or listening, everyone.